If you haven't done so already, please pause this video and go ahead and print out this sheet if you have capabilities to do so. If not, just make sure you have a blank piece of paper so that you can take notes and follow along. So what we are going to talk about are the laws of sines and cosines. These laws are used to solve what we call oblique triangles. So those are triangles that are not right triangles. They don't have a 90-degree angle in them. So first, the law of sines. So what the law of sines says is that if you have an angle and its opposite side and any other piece of the triangle, then you can use your law of sines, because what you're going to do is you're going to set up a proportion. So the sine of angle A over the side A is going to be equal to the sine of angle B over side B, which is also equal to the sine of C over side C. So these are all proportional. You are obviously only going to use two of these at a time, and it'll be based off of what information you have in your triangle. So if you have angle A and side A, and then maybe you have angle B and you need to find side B, then you would just use this much of it. And you would just set up a proportion and solve it. So the law of sines can't always be used, but if you do have an angle and its opposite side, then you can definitely use it. So here's an example. So we have an angle here and its opposite side, so we can definitely use the law of sines. So the angle that we have is angle B. So we're going to set it up as the sine of B over side B equals, and then if I want to find side A, I have angle A, so I'm going to set it up as sine of 35 or sine of A over little a. So you're only going to use two of those ratios at a time. And then you just fill in your information. So the sine of B, so it's the sine of 103 over 20, because that's the side length, equals the sine of angle A, which is 35, over little a, and that's what we would be looking for. And then you're just going to set this up. You're going to cross multiply. So multiply the sine of 103 times a, so we get a sine of 103 equals 20 times the sine of 35, so it's 20 sine 35. Okay, and then I don't want you to punch this part in your calculator just yet. Wait until the very end and make sure that you get your answer as close to an exact value as possible. So you're going to go ahead and divide both sides by the sine of 103 in order to isolate a. These will cancel out because the sine of 103, well, that's just a number. And then you punch this in your calculator. So I'm going to punch that in, 20 times the sine of 35. And then make sure you close your parenthesis behind the 35, and then divide that by the sine of 103. So, and what you get is 11.773. So we're going to just round to 2 decimal places today, 11.77. Okay, so when do we use the law of sines? You use the law of sines when you have an angle. So you need an angle and its opposite side. And then any other piece of the triangle. Should have typed this. This would be neater for you guys. Okay, any other piece of the triangle. And then all you do is you set up a proportion and you solve it. Now, if you don't have an angle and its opposite side, that's where we're going to skip down to the next part here. That's when you're going to use your law of cosines. So your law of cosines, if you look at that, there's my dog and my kid being crazy. Sorry about that. So if you notice here, this looks very similar to your Pythagorean theorem. right? We have an a squared, a b squared, a c squared. So where you're going to use when you're going to use this is when you can't use the law of sines. Law of sines is easier, so use it when you can. This one, they give me this angle here, angle B, but I don't have the opposite side. I have this side, but I don't have the opposite angle. I have this side, but I don't have the opposite angle. So there's no way that I can use the law of sines for this. So I'm going to use the law of cosines. So for this one here, we're going to solve for B. So we're going to solve for little b. So the angle, the only angle involved here is angle B. So this is going to be the format of the formula you're going to use. It's all very similar. It just depends on what angle you have or what angle you're using. So we have angle B. We're going to be using angle B. So that's why we're going to choose this one. So all it is, if you notice, this letter and this letter are the same, right? So you're going to isolate the side opposite the angle you have or the angle you're looking for. So we're going to our b squared equals a squared. Well, a is 7, so 7 squared plus c squared. Well, c is 13 minus 2 times a, which is 7, times c, which is 13, times the cosine of 115. And then if you just punch this all in your calculator just like that, just exactly the way it looks, and then you take the square root of that number, and your answers are always going to be positive. We're not going to worry about our plus or minus because we're talking about triangles here. The side lengths are always positive. Punch this in your calculator, take the square root of it, and that's your answer. Give me a second here. Okay, so 294.916. I see that in my calculator. It doesn't make sense with what I have here because look, this is 13, this is 7. Well, that's just b squared. It's because I didn't take the square root of it yet. So you're going to make sure you take the square root of your answers. And I end up with 17.17. B equals 17.17. And that makes more sense with the other measurements that I have on my triangle. So you really just, you determine which format of this you're going to use, and then you just plug it in. Okay, so for this one, I always think about, okay, when do I use the law of cosines? Well, I just use it when I can't use my law of sines. Okay, so if you look on the next page here, I just want you to do the first 6. Okay, stop here. You're going to have to get out a separate sheet of paper because there's no room on here for you to do this. But they want you to determine whether the law of sines or the law of cosines should be used, and then go ahead and sketch and solve each of the triangles. Now, when it says solve the triangle, then that means find everything that's missing. So, for example, number 1, I have big A, so I have angle A. In order to be able to use the law of sines for this, I'm going to have side A. Well, they give me side B, they give me side C. So for this first one, I cannot use my law of sines, so I know I have to use the law of cosines. And when you go to set this up, because the angle that you have is angle A, you're going to start with the one that reads A squared equals B squared plus C squared minus 2BC cosine of A. So that's how you pick. It depends on what angle that you have. Okay, and look, if you look at number 2, I have 1, 2, 3 sides here. I don't have any angles, so I cannot use my law of sines here. I have to use my law of cosines because they didn't even give me any angles. Okay, so a little tip when you're using the law of cosines. Oh, never mind. Sorry, I was thinking ahead. And then I'll go ahead and do number 3 real quick with you just to determine. So look, we have side A right here. We have angle A right here. So since I see the same letter, I know this is the angle and this is the side that's opposite of that angle. So this one, I can definitely use my law of sines. Okay, so that's how they want you to just go through and determine what you can use, but then go ahead and use it to solve the triangle. All right, so there are 6 solutions or 6 problems there. So go ahead and try those, and I'll put the solutions up later this afternoon with all my steps so you can see how they're done. And let me know if you have questions. Thanks.